The storm rolled in fast. One minute the trees whispered gently above her, the next they howled. Lynn pressed deeper into the foliage, arms raised to block branches clawing at her face. Her shoes were soaked, her phone was dead, and the trail, if it had ever been a real one, was gone. "Hello?" she called again, her voice thin beneath the rising wind. No one answered, just the creak of branches and the slap of leaves, just the knowledge that her group had left her behind. For a moment, the absurdity of it stung more than the fear. A weekend hike, teen bonding, nature detox. She had trusted them, thought they'd turn around, wait. They didn't. Thunder cracked like a whip above her head. The sky opened. Rain sheeted through the canopy, soaking her hair, her shirt, her breath. She stumbled over a root, fell hard, cried out. Her ankle twisted. Sharp pain bloomed. And that's when she screamed. A raw, primal, helpless scream, louder than the thunder. It echoed through the trees torn away by the wind. And someone heard it. Malik was checking his traps when he heard it. It wasn't an animal, not even close. It was too human, too panicked, too alone. He dropped the line he'd been resetting and turned toward the sound. No hesitation. He knew these woods, every ridge and drop, and he also knew the rare, brutal sound of real fear. His boots thudded against soaked earth, his coat flapped behind him. The rain didn't bother him, neither did the dark, but the voice, that pulled at him like gravity. It didn't take long. She was curled beneath a crooked cedar, shivering, ankle twisted, mud streaked across her face and arms. Her eyes widened when she saw him, a tall, broad-shouldered black man with a soaked jacket, a quiet stare, and calloused hands. "I'm not here to hurt you," Malik said, voice low and calm. "Are you injured?" She tried to speak, but her lip trembled too much. I think I twisted my ankle." He knelt without a word, checked her leg gently. "You're lucky. Nothing's broken." "I got left behind," she whispered. "They didn't wait. I was slow." He didn't comment, just shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Can you stand?" She shook her head. He didn't ask again. He lifted her like she weighed nothing and turned toward the trees. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice small. "Someplace dry, safe." "Do you live out here?" "I live nearby." She hesitated, then whispered, "Why did you come for me?" Malik looked at her through the downpour, then forward again. "Because someone should have." And he carried her into the forest, away from the trail, away from the storm, towards something neither of them had expected to find. Malik's cabin wasn't much to look at, not from the outside. Tucked between a ring of moss-covered boulders and a thicket of fern, it stood like it had grown there. Rough-hewn wood, a tin roof patched with bark, and a porch slanted just enough to make you hesitate. But it was dry, and it was safe. He carried her across the threshold and gently laid her on a narrow cot by the wall. A wood-burning stove crackled softly nearby, radiating the kind of warmth she hadn't felt in hours. "I'll get something for your ankle," he said, removing his boots without a sound. She stared at the ceiling, heart still pounding. Her clothes were soaked, skin chilled to the bone, but she said nothing, just listened. To the soft shuffle of Malik's steps, to the wind pressing against the cabin walls, to her own racing thoughts. He returned with a cloth and a small metal tin. "This'll sting," he warned, kneeling beside her. She didn't flinch as he dabbed her ankle. The salve smelled like pine and lemon. His hands were steady, practiced, not the hands of someone new to this life. "You live here alone?" she asked, finally, her voice hoarse. "I do." "How long?" He paused, shrugged. "Long enough." The silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy. Just unspoken. Malik stood and moved to the stove, tossing in a few more logs. The fire flared, bathing the room in amber light. There's dry clothes in the chest, bathrooms outside, left of the porch. "No signal, huh?" she asked, half smiling. He headed his head. No bars, no towers, no noise. She exhaled, not sure whether to feel comforted or terrified by that. "I'm Lynn, by the way." He nodded once. "Malik. Thanks for coming back for me." Malik turned to face him fully. His gaze was steady, unreadable, like a mountain trying to decide whether or not to shift. "I didn't do anything special." "You showed up. That's more than most." Later, after she changed and wrapped herself in a thick wool blanket, Malik handed her a bowl of something hot. Simple stew. Potatoes, lentils, wild herbs. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until she smelled it. And as she ate, he sat across from her, not asking questions, not filling the silence, just watching, quiet, steady. It was the first time in a long while someone had looked at her and expected nothing. Not answers, not smiles, not strength she didn't have. And under the soft crackle of firelight, in a stranger's cabin built from solitude, something in her chest loosened. Just enough to breathe.
The morning came quiet. The kind of quiet Ling had never known before. No sirens, no phones buzzing, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Only the soft trill of birds and the distant crack of branches shifting with the wind. She woke with the unfamiliar ache of sleeping too still. The cot creaked beneath her as she sat up, blanket sliding to her waist. Malik's jacket still hung on the back of the door, damp from yesterday's storm. The cabin was empty, but not cold. A kettle hissed gently on the stove, and through the small window, she caught a glimpse of Malik moving through the trees, steady, calm, part of the forest. She didn't know how long she watched him, only that it was easier than thinking. He returned around mid-morning with a small bundle of herbs and 2 trout slung over one shoulder. When he stepped through the door, Ling was seated cross-legged on the cot, her ankle bandaged and propped on a crate. "I boiled water," she said, trying to sound helpful. "Good," he replied, then set the fish on a cutting board. "Eat first, then we check your leg." She studied him while he worked. There was a rhythm to everything he did, cleaning the fish, chopping herbs, layering the fire. He spoke little, but there was no coldness in it, only intention. "Were you always like this?" "Like what?" Quiet." He didn't answer right away. Then, "Noise doesn't always mean connection." "So, you chose this life?" "This life chose me." He looked up. "You regret yelling last night?" The question caught her off guard. "What? No, I was scared." "You should be. A person lost in the storm? Twisted ankle? No light? Fear is natural. Screaming brought you to me. Never apologize for surviving." Ling blinked. Something about the way he said it, like he was reminding himself as much as her, made her chest tighten. After breakfast, Malik checked her bandage, replacing it with deft hands. The swelling had gone down. She could stand, barely, using the wall for balance. "You're strong," he said simply. "You don't know me." "Don't need to." She laughed softly. "You're mysterious, Malik." He gave a slight shrug. "I'm quiet. That's different." "You live in the middle of nowhere, rescue women from the woods, make herbal soup like a wilderness monk? You talk a lot. I do, she smiled. City habit. They locked eyes for a second longer than necessary. Then he stood. Rain's gone. Should dry out by tomorrow. If you want, I'll guide you to the main road then. Something in her chest pulled back. Right, she said. Back to the real world. This is real. No, this is borrowed. The world I live in doesn't sound like this. Malik didn't reply. Just opened the door and stepped outside, letting the silence stretch between them again. But this time, it wasn't cold. It was full of questions neither was ready to ask.
They started at dawn. Mist curled low across the forest floor, softening the world into grays and pale greens. Malik moved with practiced ease, stepping over roots, ducking under branches, always a few strides ahead. Lynn followed, leaning on a walking stick he'd carved from cedar the night before. Every step sent a throb through her ankle, but she didn't complain. Not once. Not even when the mud pulled at her shoes or when a thorn caught her sleeve. Not when the cold bit through her borrowed jacket or when silence wrapped around them like fog. Malik glanced back every so often, making sure she kept up. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," she lied, smiling. He didn't press. They paused by a stream for water. Lynn crouched by the edge, dipping her fingers in the current. It was shockingly cold. "How far is the road?" "Few hours, if the trail's still clear." "And after that, what, you go back to trapping rabbits?" Malik raised an eyebrow. "I teach survival. I trap only what I need." "Right. You're the ethical mountain man." He gave a short huff of amusement. "Better than getting lost in heels and blaming the trees." She smirked. "I wasn't wearing heels." "Close enough." A silence settled between them. Not awkward, but aware. Then Lynn sat down on a flat rock and looked at him. "Why do you live out here, really?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crouched by the stream, ran a hand through the water. "I lost someone," he said at last, "and the world didn't feel like something I wanted to stay in, not the way it was." Lynn's smile faded. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. The woods don't ask me to explain myself. They just let me breathe." She looked around, at the moss-covered stones and whispering pines. "I get that," she murmured. "I think I've been holding my breath for years." By midday, sunlight streamed through the treetops, golden and warm. The air smelled of sap and damp earth. When they crested a small ridge, Malik stopped. "That's the trailhead," he pointed to a clearing ahead. "Phone signal starts about 10 minutes down." Lynn slowed to a stop beside him. There it was, the road. Civilization. The world she came from. Somewhere out there, her friends were probably posting group selfies, pretending she hadn't disappeared for 2 days. Her phone would buzz to life, emails would flood in, schedules, deadlines, noise. She didn't move. "I thought I'd feel relieved," she said quietly. "You're not?" "I feel like I'm leaving something behind." He looked at her. Not with expectation, not with sadness. Just presence. "You don't owe the world anything, Lynn, but you do owe yourself honesty." "You sound like someone who ran away." "Maybe. But sometimes running away is just the start of coming back different." She didn't reply, just stood there beside him, staring down the path. And for a while, neither of them moved. The city hadn't changed. Still loud, still rushing, still obsessed with time. Horns blared, neon signs blinked in windows. The coffee tasted burnt and expensive, and people didn't make eye contact when they passed you. But something in Lynn had shifted. She noticed it the moment she stepped into her apartment, a clean, polished one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows that stared out over concrete and glass. Too much space, too much silence, and still not the right kind. Her inbox was full. Her voicemail had 12 missed calls, all marked urgent. Her group chat, the one with her so-called friends, was flooded with laughing emojis and one blurry photo of her, half visible behind a tree. "Where'd she go? LOL. Girl vanished like Blair Witch. LOL." No one had called search and rescue. No one had even stayed behind. Lynn sat on her couch, phone in hand, staring at that photo. And for the first time, she didn't feel forgotten. She felt done. Days passed. She tried to return to normal, meetings, morning coffee, meal preps, but every sound was too loud, every conversation too shallow, every hour stretched and snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight. What haunted her wasn't the fear of the forest. It was the peace she'd found there. And Malik. His eyes, always steady. His voice calm even when she was breaking. The way he listened, not to respond, but to understand. Lynn remembered the warmth of the fire in his cabin, the smell of rain on cedar, the way her name had sounded in his mouth. She hadn't even told him her last name. That realization hit her in the middle of brushing her teeth one night. She stared at her reflection, foam at her lips, and whispered, "He doesn't even know who I am." She spat, rinsed, and stared harder. "I don't think I do either." 2 weeks later, she was back in hiking boots. Her coworkers called her crazy. Her friends rolled their eyes. She didn't care. She booked a shuttle to the trailhead. She carried food, a light pack, and a handwritten note just in case she got lost again. But she wouldn't. She remembered the turn near the fallen pine, the moss-covered stone like a crooked tooth, the sound of the stream that whispered right before the ridge. She found his cabin by late afternoon. The sun had begun to dip, casting long shadows between the trees. Malik was sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of wood. When he saw her, he didn't startle. He didn't even rise. He just set the carving down and said, "You made it back." "Yeah," she breathed, stepping into the clearing. "I did." A beat passed, then another. "You hungry?" She laughed, and it cracked something open. "Only if you're still making that pine stew." Malik stood, opened the cabin door, and gestured her inside. No questions, no explanations. Only a place she had never truly left. The first night back felt both familiar and entirely new. Lynn lay on the same cot, wrapped in the same blanket, listening to the same forest sounds that once frightened her, only now they felt like music. The wind rustling through trees, the soft croak of frogs by the stream, even the occasional crack of branches in the dark. No streetlights, no traffic, only stars. She couldn't remember the last time she'd looked up and actually seen them. Malik didn't speak much the first few days, but he didn't need to. He handed her tools when she asked, guided her quietly when she fumbled through tying a rope or starting a fire. He showed her how to read animal tracks in the soil, where to find edible greens, and how to move through the forest like she belonged in it. They rose with the sun, cooked together, tended the small herb garden behind the cabin. Some nights they didn't say more than 10 words, but the silence between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a kind of understanding. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" she asked, one afternoon while they watched a hawk circle overhead. Malik rested his back against a tree. Not really. The forest doesn't interrupt. It doesn't expect anything from me. And what about people? She pressed carefully. He looked at her, his face unreadable for a moment. People come with noise, but sometimes one comes with peace. Her breath caught slightly, but she said nothing. That night, as the fire popped softly and the moon climbed high above the treetops, Malik brought out a second blanket and spread it beside the fire pit. Lynn joined him without speaking. They sat shoulder to shoulder, knees pulled to their chests, both staring into the flames. I always thought I was running from something, but maybe I was just waiting to arrive somewhere I could breathe. Malik poked the fire with a stick, watching the embers dance. Takes people years to figure that out. You did it fast. I had help. She turned to him. He didn't look back, but she saw the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. You could stay, he said quietly. For how long? As long as the sky doesn't fall. Lynn tilted her head toward the stars. Then I guess we're safe. They stayed that way, a long time. Not touching, not moving, just two souls under the same sky. And for the first time in a long, long while, Lynn didn't feel like she needed to prove herself. She just was. Here. Enough.
It began with a search for wild mint. The air was unusually still that morning, the sun only barely pushing through thick clouds. Lynn followed Malik along a narrow animal trail, the forest damp and humming from last night's rain. She had grown more confident on her feet, even with uneven ground and hidden roots beneath the moss. The best mint grows by moving water, Malik said, crouching to examine a cluster of ferns. Cool shade, soft soil, near rocks. Like you, Lynn teased, smiling. Cool, shaded, and a little hard on the outside. He gave a small grunt, which she had learned was his version of a laugh. They walked in silence for a while, then Malik slowed near a ridge lined with jagged stone. The ground sloped strangely, descending where it shouldn't. Lynn paused as Malik brushed back overgrown brush with his hand. There, behind a wall of ivy, was an opening. "You ever seen this before?" she asked. Malik stepped closer, brow furrowed. No. That alone sent a ripple of unease through her. He had lived here for years, knew every tree, every bend in the river, every crooked route. For him to say no meant this place was wrong, or very well hidden. He parted the vines more carefully now, revealing a narrow gap, not wide but tall enough to duck into. Cool, musty air breathed out from within. "It's not natural," he murmured. "Not entirely." "Man-made?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed a small flashlight from his belt and handed her a second one. "You don't have to go in," he said. "You think I'm going to stay behind now?" she said, already ducking after him. The passage sloped downward. Rough stone walls on either side glistened with moisture. As they moved deeper, the sounds of the forest fell away, replaced by dripping water and the occasional creak of shifting rock. Dust hung thick in the beam of their lights. Then they saw it. Not far from the entrance was a small room, or what looked like one, carved out in rectangular lines, clearly shaped by hands. There were rusted tools along the edge, a broken lantern, and a canvas pack buried halfway in rubble. Lynn knelt by it, fingers brushing over cracked leather, and faint initials burned into the flap. R.M. "This place was used," she whispered. "Abandoned," Malik added, running a hand along the wall. "Mining maybe, but unofficial. No records of this near here." "Illegal, you mean?" "Possibly." They explored further but found only more narrow corridors and small dead-end alcoves. The cave twisted like it had been chiseled in a hurry, or under pressure. Someone had once worked here. Lived here, maybe. hid something here. Why cover it up? Lynn asked. Malik was quiet for a moment. Because they didn't want it found. Back outside, the forest felt different. The birds were back, the air moved again. Lynn turned to look at the entrance once more, just a shadow behind leaves. If they hadn't been looking for mint, they would have never seen it. We should tell someone, she said. Malik didn't answer right away. We should be careful, he finally replied. You think it's dangerous? He looked at her, now serious. I think when people bury something this deep, they don't like it being dug up. And though the sun had risen fully now, bright above the trees, Lynn couldn't help but feel like they had stepped into something that didn't want to be uncovered. Something still watching.
It started that night. Malik was sharpening his blade by the fire while Lynn read an old survival manual she had pulled from a shelf. Outside, the forest hummed with its usual rhythm. Crickets, frogs, the occasional owl's call. Familiar, comforting. Until it wasn't. Crack. Both of them froze. It wasn't the sound of a branch falling or an animal passing through. It was deliberate. Weight on dry bark. A step. Malik stood silently, eyes narrowing, and moved to the window. Lynn felt her pulse spike. Probably just a deer, she whispered. Deer don't watch cabins, Malik replied softly. The next sound came 5 minutes later. Closer. Slower. Then silence. The next morning, they found the tracks. Human. Heavy boots. A wide gate, leading from the southern edge of the property all the way to the back of the cabin. Malik crouched over one print, brow furrowed. Could be hikers? No one hikes this deep without gear or purpose. Lynn glanced toward the woods. You think it has something to do with the cave? I think we weren't supposed to find it. That sentence lingered between them the rest of the day. That afternoon, Lynn went to fetch water from the stream alone, something she had done dozens of times now. But today, the forest felt off. No birdsong, no wind, just thick stillness like the trees were holding their breath. She bent over the water, filling the tin kettle, when something glinted in the corner of her eye. Across the stream, half buried in a bush, was a trail cam. Modern, camouflaged. She approached it slowly. It was active, the small red light blinking behind a layer of leaves. She yanked it out of the foliage and hurried back to the cabin. They're watching, she said, tossing the camera onto the table. Malik examined it. His jaw tightened. Infrared, motion activated. This is military grade or private contractor. You think they're still using that cave? No. But I think they're watching to make sure no one else does. That night, they didn't light the fire. Malik sat near the door with a flashlight and a knife resting across his lap. Lynn lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, her heart refusing to settle. Why do I feel like we kicked a beehive? She asked. Because we did, answered Malik. We should go to the police. And tell them what? That we found a cave and someone walked outside our cabin? Yes. Do you really think they'll believe you? Lynn hesitated. She didn't know what to say, because she wouldn't have believed it either, not 2 weeks ago. Then what do we do? Malik looked out the window. The wind rustled the trees, soft, deceptive. We listen. To what? He turned toward her, eyes hard. To whatever comes next. And in the quiet that followed, the forest whispered again, not with words, but with the weight of eyes neither of them could see. The storm hit without warning. One moment the sky was cloudy and still. The next, thunder cracked so close it rattled the tin roof of the cabin. Rain pelted the windows in heavy sheets. The forest darkened, the trees groaning under the weight of wind and water. Malik moved fast, pulling in supplies from the porch, reinforcing the windows, checking the radio. Lynn helped where she could, heart pounding. She had never heard the woods this loud, like the whole forest had woken up and was howling in protest. Is this normal? She asked. Not like this, Malik replied, his voice low. Something shifting. And it was. Not just in the weather, but in the feel of the place, like the forest had snapped, like something long hidden was being dragged out of the earth by force. By morning, the storm had passed. What it left behind was chaos. Trees were down across the trail. Small landslides had shifted the river's edge. The cabin was intact, but Malik's garden had been torn through by wind. The trail to the cave was buried in broken limbs and mud. "We need to check the stream," Malik said. They made their way slowly, boots sinking in soaked ground. As they approached the waterline, Lynn slowed. Something glinted at the edge of the newly widened bank, half buried in dark, wet soil. She bent down and brushed mud away. A metal box. Old, rusted, locked shut but partially cracked open by the storm. "What is this?" she whispered. Malik helped her pull it out. It was heavier than it looked. They carried it back to the cabin, set it on the table, and pried it open with a hunting knife. Inside, papers, photos, maps, coordinates, a journal. The first page was marked in clean, steady handwriting. Property of Raymond Malik. Surveillance notes, 2006 to 2009. Do not disclose. Lynn blinked. Wait, Malik? She looked up at him, but his face had gone still, unreadable. "Your name's Malik." He nodded once. "He was my uncle before it was mine." Lynn turned to the journal. The entries were meticulous, documenting movements in and out of the woods, strange lights, equipment left behind in the cave, coded references to something called Operation Overstone. "He was tracking them," she said, "whoever they were." "And he disappeared," Malik added quietly. "No body, no investigation, just gone." She met his eyes, the truth blooming in her mind. "That's why you're out here." He nodded again. "I didn't just come to get away. You came to finish what he started." Malik exhaled, a long, heavy breath. "I thought it was over. I thought the land was clean, but it's not. And now they know we found something." Lynn glanced at the journal again. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "Then we find out the rest before they do." Outside, the rain had stopped, but the real storm had just begun. The smoke woke them. It was sharp, acrid, not the soft scent of a morning fire, but the biting stench of something wrong. Malik was out of bed before Lynn could speak, already throwing open the door. The porch was glowing orange. "Get out!" he barked. Flames licked up the side of the cabin, fast and hungry. The wood, dry from heat despite the storm, crackled and spit embers like warning shots. Malik grabbed the journal, the metal box, and shoved Lynn through the back exit as the roof began to creak. They ran. No time for shoes, no time for thought. Only instinct. From the safety of the tree line, they watched the fire consume everything. The garden, the tools, the walls that had held silence and safety for years. Gone in minutes. It wasn't an accident. They knew that as soon as they saw the gas can near the steps, just visible through the smoke. Malik crouched low behind the trees, fists clenched. They wanted to erase it. "Erase you," Lynn corrected, voice trembling. They had nothing now. No food, no shelter, no phone. Except for the box. And the journal. "They'll come back to confirm," Malik said. "We have maybe a few hours before someone's here with questions we don't want to answer. Then we go to them first." He looked at her. "You want to run toward the people who just tried to kill us? I want to be the first one to speak, before they have time to twist this." They made it to town by dusk, dirty, exhausted, clothes still smelling of smoke. The sheriff's office was a squat building near the edge of the square. Malik hesitated at the door. "They won't believe me." "Maybe not, but they might believe me." And she walked in first,
Inside, she told the story straight. The fire, the history of the land, the cave, the camera, the stolen surveillance logs. She showed the photos from the journal, the military markings, the coordinates. The deputy narrowed his eyes. "Miss, are you saying someone deliberately set your cabin on fire?" "I'm saying someone set it to silence us." "And who would want to do that?" She slid the final photo across the desk, a grainy black-and-white image of 3 men in suits standing at the mouth of the cave. One of them wore a badge that wasn't local law enforcement. Federal. "You tell me." The next day, the headlines told a different story. "Unlicensed occupant resists eviction. Cabin destroyed in fire." Local officials say the land was under review for conservation and privately owned by a real estate development group. They were calling Malik a squatter, calling Lynn a trespasser, calling the fire an unfortunate accident. "They're framing us," she said, tossing the paper aside. "Of course they are," Malik said quietly. "The truth costs too much." "What now?" Malik picked up the journal, flipping to the final page, one neither of them had seen before. At the bottom, scrawled in hurried handwriting, was a name, Vera Hallstrom. "Do not trust." Next to it, an address, a date, and a stamp that read Confidential Project Overstone. Malik met her eyes. "Now," he said, "we finish what my uncle started."
They found Vera Hallstrom in a gray house with red shutters, tucked at the edge of a dying town in upstate New York. No welcome mat, no mailbox, just a long gravel path and a gate that creaked like it hadn't opened in years. Malik didn't want to knock. She was part of the project, he said. She could be dangerous. "She was also marked, 'Do not trust,' by a man who vanished," Lynn replied. "We don't have the luxury of trusting anyone anyway." So she knocked. Once. Twice. Nothing. Then, just as Malik turned to leave, the door opened an inch. A woman peered through the crack, thin, hollow-eyed, with wild silver hair and an oxygen tank trailing behind her like a leash. "You shouldn't be here," she rasped. "They still watch." "We're not with them," Lynn said quickly. "We found the Overstone records. Your name was in them. We just want to talk." Vera stared at them a moment longer, then opened the door all the way. "Then you'd better come in before someone sees." The living room smelled like dust and something older. Walls lined with books, old photographs turned face down, a cracked TV that hadn't been on in years. Vera sat in a creaking recliner and motioned for them to sit. "Overstone," she muttered, as if it tasted bitter. "You kids don't know what you've stepped in." "Then help us understand," Malik said. "It was never supposed to reach civilians. In 2003, the federal government approved an underground surveillance project across multiple national forests. Secret mapping, sensor placement, strategic mineral interest. No press, no accountability." "Why forests?" Lynn asked. "Because no one notices what happens beneath trees." She reached for a dusty file folder hidden beneath the cushion. Inside, photos of drill equipment, maps of tunnels, and one that made Lynn's stomach twist, a blurry image of Raymond Malik standing near a cave circled in red ink. "Your uncle was the first to speak out," Vera said, glancing at Malik. "He knew what we were doing was illegal. Worse, we were damaging something we couldn't put back. Poisoned water tables, displaced wildlife. And then, well, he vanished." "You mean you helped him vanish?" Malik growled. Vera didn't flinch. "I tried to help him escape, but they were faster." She leaned forward, eyes sharp despite the oxygen tank wheezing beside her. "They'll come for you too, especially if you still have the journal." "We do," Lynn said, "but we want to go public." Vera let out a breathless, rattling laugh. "Public? You think a blog post will stop them? This goes through federal channels, defense contractors, land acquisition groups." "Then what do you suggest?" Vera was quiet for a moment. Then she reached for her side table and pulled out a weathered flash drive. "This has names, dates, authorization codes. It was supposed to be my insurance. I was waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to come looking. She handed it to Lynn. You have two options, run or burn them down from the inside. We're not running, Malik said. Then don't get caught, Vera whispered, and don't look for me again. She stood slowly, walked to the door, and opened it wide. The conversation was over, and the war had officially begun.
The file went online at 2:14 a.m. Lynn uploaded it through an encrypted network with trembling hands. She used Dead Drop Forums, a contact in Germany, and 5 proxy servers to cover the trail. The moment she clicked Publish, the flash drive felt heavier in her palm. "It's done," she whispered. Malik stood behind her in the motel room's flickering light, jaw tight. Then we wait. They didn't wait long. By noon, the leaks had gone viral. News outlets scrambled to verify, but whistleblower forums lit up instantly. Project Overstone trended on social media. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Forest Cover-Up. Hashtag Overstone Leaks. Hashtag Malik Files. A few brave journalists called it the Snowden of the land war. Others called it conspiracy. But too much evidence had been dropped. Signed memos, restricted maps, payment logs from private defense contractors, GPS coordinates that matched environmental damage long blamed on natural erosion. Then came the names. And that's when everything changed. Lynn and Malik checked out of the motel by nightfall. They were already being followed. The black SUV appeared near the gas station, then again 2 blocks later. The third time, it parked across from the diner and never turned off its headlights. "They won't arrest us," Malik said, tossing his bag in the truck bed. "They'll discredit us first, smear campaign, then threats, then maybe something quieter." "We knew this was coming," Lynn replied, sliding into the passenger seat. "Knowing doesn't make it easier." They drove through the night, switching routes, turning off phones, avoiding major roads. It felt like war now, only they were civilians with a hard drive, facing giants in tailored suits. The first article dropped the next morning. Fraudulent activist caught fabricating documents in land dispute. Followed by survivalist with criminal ties linked to militia groups. And missing data, fake names, no proof. Who are Lynn Dow and Malik Ray? Lynn stared at the screen in silence. Her hands felt numb. "They're rewriting us," she said. "No," Malik said, eyes steady. "They're afraid of us." Then her phone buzzed, the backup one, used only for emergencies. A single message blinked on the screen. From a reporter she trusted. "They're blocking everything, but I saved a copy. Meet me in D.C." They made the drive in silence, across state lines, beneath overcast skies, under the weight of something larger than either of them had ever imagined when they first found that cave. In D.C., the air was thick with tension. Protesters had already begun gathering outside federal buildings. People were waking up, demanding answers, planting signs that read, "Who owns our land? What else have they buried? We won't be silenced." The reporter met them in an underground garage. She took the journal, the flash drive, the camera photos, everything. "If anything happens to us," Lynn told her, "you run this everywhere. You hear me? Everywhere." "I will. But you two, be careful." They were already ghosts by the time the next article dropped. Whistleblowers identified and disappeared.
They disappeared on a Wednesday. No formal charges, no warrants, no manhunt. Just 2 names slowly erased from digital maps and public records. A quiet vanishing, like so many before them. But this time the silence didn't last. The forest remembered, and so did the people. Somewhere near the Pacific Northwest, deep in a national park far from any trail, a cabin sat tucked between old-growth cedars. It was simple. Smoke rose from its chimney. Solar panels clung to its sloped roof like moss. Inside, Lynn poured tea over a fire stove. Malik sat by the window, notebook in hand, marking the passing seasons with sketches and maps. He had traded his blade for a pen. She had traded spreadsheets for soil. Neither spoke of what they lost, because they knew what they had reclaimed. The world did not forget them. The files were too damning, too widespread. Though many networks tried to bury the leaks, independent journalists kept the flame alive. Vera Hallström's flash drive was replicated thousands of times. Copies surfaced in college lectures, activist zines, even congressional hearings. The government denied everything, then quietly settled lawsuits. Dozens of secret projects were suspended or quietly relocated. Several names resigned overnight. Some simply vanished. And in towns across the country, people began asking harder questions about who owned the land beneath their feet and why it had been taken. A year passed, then another. One afternoon, Malik returned from the edge of the valley holding a small parcel. No return address, no name. Just a flash drive and a note written in familiar, careful handwriting. The roots run deeper than you thought, but you started something that won't stop growing. The H. Lynn turned it over in her hand. "You think we keep going?" she asked. Malik looked out at the woods. "I think we never stopped." Sometimes, hikers said, they spotted movement deep in the trees. A flicker of figures between the branches, a woman's laugh echoing under the canopy, smoke curling from where no cabin should exist. No one ever found it, but they felt it. That somewhere out there, two people had cracked open the dark and planted something true inside it. A seed, a signal, a long echo.